Guard has been activated. You see the winds whipping up, the rain coming across the screen right there. More than 1,000 search and rescue teams are on standby. President Trump has just been briefed on the storm, been tweeting all morning. He says Hurricane Michael started small but grew into a monster. I want to go straight to World News Tonight anchor David Muir on the scene there in Panama City Beach. David.
And George, we cannot understate that Hurricane Michael is historic. It is a Category 4 hurricane. They have never seen a Category 4 in this region, this part of the Florida Panhandle. They dealt with Opal and with Dennis back in 95 and 2005. Those are both Cat 3s. This is a Category 5, winds, as you point out, 150 miles per hour. The outer eye wall is just beginning to touch land between where we are in Panama City Beach, and St. Vincent Island, closer to Mexico Beach, is where that outer eye wall, some of the most damaging winds set to make landfall imminently. This hurricane is about to make landfall, again, not far from where we are right now. I want to show you behind me some of the damage it's already done. You can see the trees here. One of them has already come down behind us. Most of them are bending back and forth in dramatic fashion, as you would expect to see with a hurricane bearing down on us. And the power lines, as you can see, are already coming down in the streets here behind me. And that is what they're really worried about with this hurricane. Just the sheer scope of these winds, 150 miles per hour. It's hard to wrap your head around this. They have buoys out in the water, the National Weather Service does, to sort of measure the wave size. At one point, they measured a wave up to 31 feet. And then it stopped delivering data. Sort of ominous message from the National Weather Service when the data went down. We just got an alert from the National Weather Service in Tallahassee, not far from here, an alert that we had never seen before from that particular station. They said the situation is about to get serious in Bay, Gulf, and Franklin counties. We're here in Bay County, and they said this is the first ever extreme wind warning that they've issued. That means wind gusts in excess of 130 miles per hour. Obviously, we've seen extreme wind gust warnings before, but never right here in this region. I do want to get to Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z, because she's on Mexico Beach, where I mentioned that outer band of the outer part of the eye wall just making landfall. And Ginger, we cannot underscore how significant the pressure is in this hurricane. It's dropping and has been dropping all morning long. Now lower than Katrina.
Yes, lower than Katrina, 919 millibars at the last hour. My ears have been popping for a half hour, as have the other people in this room with me. I'm not standing outside because I can't, and I won't, because it is just too dangerous. We have seen debris flying, pieces of homes, certainly huge. You can hear it. I mean, just take a listen to that incredible roar. And you know what? Fascinating. I just tasted salt from the water that came in from here. The ocean so violent, you can't even see it. It is about a block and a half from us. We did have a view of it, but now it's just a whitewash. The waves were getting so large that they were starting to overtake the dune that we had been standing on earlier for Good Morning America. Really, I have been in other storms, and I was covering Katrina, but obviously this now is the strongest as far as winds go this far north in the Gulf of Mexico since Camille, since 1969. Not a storm that a lot of people have any experience with. I am constantly trying to keep the cool. We are in a cement building. We are in the safest place we can possibly be at this point. But we are in that extreme wind warning with 130 mile per hour winds possible. And again, the debris is why I'm not standing outside, because we have seen it flying everywhere. Let me take you to the map, because if you haven't seen this image yet, you need to. Landfall is imminent somewhere between here and likely Tyndall Air Force Base. We will see that when it officially... Did you hear that too? The crashes are so ominous when you hear, you don't know what that is crashing through. But in that close-up eye on our graphic system, you can actually see the ocean below. See that water glistening there. That's that clear eye that is made for such a strong and impactful, now 150 mile per hour wind, likely making landfall as we speak. We'll get the official from the National Hurricane Center. Taking you to those extreme wind warning that includes Panama City, all the way through Apalachicola, over to about St. Mark's, it looks like. Or not St. Mark's, I'm sorry, down into Apalachicola. But as the wind keeps going to the northeast, we're not going to be the only ones dealing with hurricane force winds. Places like Dothan, Alabama, Albany, Georgia could see gusts upwards of 60 miles per hour. And there goes more. I don't know if you're hearing the crashing. Yeah. Yeah, maybe, no, we'll leave the door open. Brandon's asking if I want to shut the door. I think at this point we're going to start to wrap up, but don't forget that the storm surge on the back end of this, we've had east winds, George. East winds meaning offshore. The water has been pushing away from us. When this thing comes on the back side of it, we're not going to be done with it. We're going to see even more of that water pushing our way. We could see 9 to 13 feet across a large area of this panhandle of Florida. Such a vulnerable spot. Again, so many people. I'm hoping everyone is in their safe place. And just so everyone at home knows, if this gets too hairy, we actually have interior bedrooms and bathrooms. We have mattresses, and we'll be ready to put ourselves in the safest place possible. Just listen one more time, because I think it really is astounding. Of all the storms I've ever covered, this one will end up being the strongest, at least in my lifetime.
Ginger, those winds are as furious as any winds I've ever seen. I would advise you to close that door, but we are happy to be hearing just the roar of that. And remember, just a couple of hours ago on Good Morning America, you were on that beach, but now can't even get close to it. We do want to talk to Rob Marciano in Panama City Beach as well. Rob.
Hello, George. Easily the worst of the conditions that we've seen all morning long, as you can imagine, as this eye wall begins to approach Panama City Beach. We are just actually west of Panama City Beach, so we'll be getting that part of it. And right now, behind on this side of me is the hotel that is protecting us. Well built, very high, about 8 stories there, and the wind just humming right over the top of that, and also ripping along the sides of it, and it's been doing some damage, ripping off parts of the side of the hotel. There's a gutter right there, a kind of a flimsy fence behind that crew stand where a television crew, they wisely abandoned that position. This is all being thrown around and ripped apart. We're seeing other hotels up and down this beach line where roof tiles are being strewn off. Now, out there, the surf, you get an idea of just how strong the winds are. The waves obviously crashing in. Those are 12, 15, maybe 18-foot waves crashing on the shore, but you can see the wind just ripping along the tops of those waves there, and it's going parallel to the beach, if not slightly offshore. So that, if anything, is helping our surge issue at least here, because we're on the western flank of this. But on the eastern flank, closer to Ginger and over by Apalachicola, they're going to have that surge issue in a bad side. Thing is moving really rapidly. The good news with that is that we will only be in this situation for a good 5 or 6 hours. The bad news with that is that it will hold its structure and its strength well inland, meaning folks in southern Georgia are going to see a Cat 1 or Category 2 storm as this historic hurricane now makes landfall. More debris. My head a little bit on a swivel here. We'll go out to the street in just a little bit, George, to show you what the windward side of this storm is doing and the kind of debris it's throwing around there. We haven't seen anything other than
Sam Champion from Miami. And Sam, you know, we saw how furious those winds are right there. Earlier today, I was talking to Brock Long, the head of FEMA, and he said this is a hurricane of the worst kind. What did he mean by that?
Well, you know, when you get into this category, George, there are very few storms developed to be Cat 4. This is a strong Cat 4. Remember, if you're talking about winds about 150 miles an hour, just 156, you start to get to Cat 5. So very few storms get into this rarefied territory of being the worst storms in history, and this is one of them. And you'll remember that we were prepping people for a Cat 3 storm with this. And then even yesterday, when I started looking at the notes, I thought, you know what? There's really no reason this thing can't continue to strengthen. The Gulf has everything a storm needs to get stronger. There's no shear fighting this storm. There's no weather system fighting this storm. It's got warm water above 84 degrees right below it. The only thing that could influence this storm in any way is the shallowness of the water close to the coastline in the Gulf. And this storm is so strong already, George, it's barreling right through that. So this is going to be one of the worst storms, not only for this part of Florida in history, but destructive as well. Let's show you a little bit, George, about what's happening with the eye, the center of this storm. Now, I often call landfall on a storm when the eye wall itself makes connection, because that's what people feel. That's what, when people are hunkering down in their homes, they know when that eye moves on shore. The Hurricane Center calls the connection when the center, the lowest pressure of the storm, and that'll be right in there when it makes connection. So they'll say the official landfall of this storm is when that center of the storm moves on. But I'll tell you, George, what people are feeling right now, from where Ginger is in Mexico Beach all the way into Panama City, they're feeling the worst part of this storm, that eye wall. Now, go ahead, George.
Well, I was just going to say, Sam, why did this storm crop up so quickly?
George, this is kind of what happens with a Gulf or a Caribbean forming storm. When we have a storm that forms way off the coast of Mexico, off the coast of Africa, and we watch those things move across the Atlantic like we did with Florence, we have plenty of time to say, look, here's a storm. We have weeks, or we have days and almost a week to talk about that storm. This storm formed Saturday. It kind of spun up very quickly down in the warm waters, south of Cuba, by the Yucatan Peninsula. And so we didn't have a lot of time to talk about the storm because that's when the storm developed. The Hurricane Center is looking at everything, and we've got Nadine out there in the Atlantic right now. We've got another one to talk about in the Atlantic. But when you're looking at this, George, it's only because we've got very quick time to develop, 2 or 3 days max before they make landfall.
Okay, Sam, stand by because I want to go back to David Muir. You got something happening down there in Panama City, David?
Yeah, in fact, exactly what Sam just talked about. We are seeing the brunt of the most dangerous part of the storm begin to move in. And I want to underscore what we heard Sam just point out. You know, I was talking to the hurricane hunters who flew beside the storm and over the storm over the last 24 hours, and that was their main worry. Exactly what Sam said. In this hurricane, it is trip to get here, traveling over those warm waters of the Gulf, and no other steering mechanisms to sort of stop to knock out some of that power. It had a clear run right for the Florida Panhandle. I want to show you something in between these bands, which are getting pretty heavy here, as you can probably see at home. A number of trees have now come down around us, and we've seen a couple of power lines come down, and you see the sort of the explosion, the transformer fire in the moment. They sound like mini explosions throughout the neighborhood as the power now goes out. You see over my shoulder here, you get an idea of just the sheer strength of the outer bands of this hurricane. And as you've been pointing out, we're dealing with a Category 4, 150 miles per hour. That's just a few miles per hour shorter than what you'd need for a Category 5. This is history here in this part of the Florida Panhandle. They have not encountered a hurricane like this in forever in this particular part of the Panhandle. They've dealt with Category 3s, but nothing like this. And in fact, we heard from the FEMA administrator this afternoon who talked about the construction, which of course is always a concern when these hurricanes arrive. He brought up the buildings, that many of the buildings that were built prior to 2001 are designed to withstand a Cat 3. He also pointed out that for the families who did not get out of here, did not heed the warning, and keep in mind with this hurricane, it's been on our radar for a couple of days now, but we certainly didn't have the amount of time that we had with Florence to prepare and get families out. But for the families who stayed, he said, time has clearly run out, and now the hurricane is here. He told them just a couple of hours ago to seek shelter, to get within a stairwell or within a hallway inside the building. And for viewers watching us right now, we always get the tweets, and I really appreciate them. I just want you to know that regardless of the wind that you're seeing right here, we are covered in a concrete area here with concrete posts on either side of us to protect us. And I just want to let you know at home that we are protected in that way, and we'll certainly head indoors. A lot of families inside who've left their homes, who I've been talking with all morning long, and as they've been asking too. And you know, they have lived here for generations and have not seen something to this scope. One of the things that we heard from the administrator, Brock Long, with FEMA, and you saw him during Florence, you see him again now during Hurricane Michael, he told people to find a structure that can withstand 150 mile per hour winds. It's a tough thing to answer because they simply have not seen. I just want you to take a look. This is what it looks like as a Cat 4 moves in. Trees are coming down in front of us. Power lines have come down. We've seen, as I mentioned, those explosions right before our eyes. And again, these are just the outer bands. As Sam and Ginger were pointing out, the hurricane now coming ashore between where we are here in Panama City Beach, not far from where we are, between here and Vincent Island, and Mexico Beach is sort of the in-between point. And you heard from Ginger how she felt the pressure. Her ears have been popping all morning long, and there's a focus on the pressure, and it's significant. It is lower than what we saw in Katrina. It has been dropping steadily over the course of several hours this morning, and we've watched this intensify before it makes landfall. And I just want you to hear what it sounds like standing out here, just the sheer force of this. Listen to this. extraordinary to witness firsthand. And one of the things I have to say that in being here for the last 24 hours, we did notice there were very few people left on the beach, very few people out, even in these final hours before the hurricane. An extremely good sign, given the fact that they did not have a lot of time to prepare for this one. A couple of key factors that are different about Hurricane Michael from Hurricane Florence and obviously Harvey, which is still so fresh in our memory, is that this hurricane is moving much more quickly. It's not going to come ashore and simply sit here and dump water like what we saw in Florence and what we saw, of course, in Harvey. This is going to move much more quickly. It doesn't mean it's any less destructive. In fact, the winds they are very concerned about. That's why there's states of emergency, not only here in Florida, but as you go through Alabama, through Georgia. An alert went out in Georgia not long ago, not about hundreds of trees coming down, but the possibility that they'll see thousands of trees come down, that there'll be power out not just for days, but for weeks to come. But just given the scope of what we're witnessing right here, I do want to go back to meteorologist Ginger Z. As I mentioned, she's on Mexico Beach between Panama City and Vincent Island. And Ginger, I know the outer bands were hitting you moments ago. I can't even explain how we've seen this pick up in just the last couple of minutes. I'm curious what you're seeing right now.
And that's how quickly it happens, David. We are in the eye wall. And that's how quickly it happens, David. We are in the eye wall, so we're on that right side, the dirty side. And George had asked me to not only shut the door, but look, we've had to step away from the door because debris is flying so close to our hotel. You see that right there. You see that, and we have a wind gust. Max is talking to me saying there's 129 mile per hour wind gust recorded, but our window here is a hurricane-proof glass door, and it has been bowing, and so we wanted to step away from that. It looks so much like the hurricane I always describe to people, and that is a washing machine. You have all of this water, you have all of this wind, and you can't see anything. Just 20 minutes ago, I was able to see the homes right across. I have no idea if they are there still. I don't know what type of damage has been done. We keep hearing crashes and bangs, and that means that debris is flying off, rolling down the roads here and hitting into the building. The other thing that I just started to feel, and we're on, just to give you an idea, we're on stilts in a cement building on the second floor, which is actually like the third floor. And I'm starting to feel just a little bit of tremor. That is the wind being that ferocious and almost like a little bump that is moving the entire building. Again, I feel very safe within this structure specifically. We actually have interior rooms, and I can show you it's not just this room, but there's a bathroom, and I know we're stopped up right there. But the bathroom, we put a mattress in because that's a last resort. That's what we do. And everything's kind of going wild here.
Ginger?
Oh, and there's some debris that just came up on our deck. You can see right there. Yes, go ahead, George.
Yeah, as you were hunkering down this morning, has the rest of the neighborhood evacuated?
A lot of people left. Oh, you're hearing that. The debris hit the windows here. I'm sorry. Now you're kind of seeing that washing machine. You guys can step away there too, Brandon and Tim. And yes, a lot of people have left, but the people that did end up staying, actually the woman who's in the building with us here, Kimberly, has a home that's right on the water, and she was so scared that wasn't going to be there anymore, and I think it was a very good move for her not only to move inland a little bit, but into a cement structure, because that's really the only way to survive in these types of things. Because when you have a Category 4, and I know Sam was mentioning this, we're talking about 150 mile per hour winds that can make even well-built structures you can't occupy them. They can take the roof, they can take the walls, and the type of damage, and here goes the warnings. For some reason, our smoke alarm keeps going off. We think maybe because of steam that is building up inside of here.
How long will the winds of this intensity last right where you are?
And that's a great question, because that's people who are holding on and saying, how long is this going to last for? I think we're going to end up, especially here in Mexico City, because I don't think we're going to get the eye. I think we're going to be right on the right side of it for the next hour and a half or so of this intensity. That is where you get the damage. If the first gust of 120 doesn't do it, the next gust of 130 can do it. And you've got time to do it. Fortunately, as David was mentioning, this thing is slicing in comparison to a lot of the other hurricanes that we've dealt with recently. So moving at 14 miles per hour, that's going to help us because it will move on. The other thing that I mentioned earlier that I am really more concerned about is the water on the backside of this, the surge that could still come. It's not just surge on the front, it's surge overall. And I don't know if you can see here, we have the doors shut, water's bubbling up from outside, just from the rain alone. That is not from surge or anything. That's just from rain alone kind of entering this condo and taking over the floors. So that's the very minimal damage that we'll be seeing here. The power lines are just dancing outside of there. Not something that you'd want to be a part of. And so much, doesn't it look like a car wash? That's what it looks like. It looks like we're inside of a car wash that has 129 mile per hour winds.
Yeah, we can tell. I can't imagine what it's like just to be a few feet from it right there, Ginger. Now I want to pull away and give people a sense of the scale of this storm. Look at a shot of the storm of Hurricane Michael from space right there. And you can see, and Ginger was talking about this earlier, that well-formed eye there. President Trump calling this a monster storm as well earlier today. Just a massive storm moving so quickly across Florida and into Georgia. Want to go back on the ground now to WPLG's Terrell Forney in Apalachicola.
George, we are seeing the devastating impact that Hurricane Michael.
Apalachicola.
George, we are seeing the devastating impact that Hurricane Michael is having in areas along the Florida Panhandle. Take a look behind me. You can see all of that driving rain. Look at those palm trees. They are no match to all of the wind that is pushing in from the Gulf. This has been the scene here in Apalachicola throughout the entire day. What we've noticed is a change in the wind. It was gusty earlier in the day, but these strong winds are now sustained. They are not giving up as Hurricane Michael inches near to this area. We can also tell you that we've driven around this area along the Apalachicola River, and that river has already spilled its banks. There is water overflowing into a park and into a road. Storm surge was a big threat in this community. Forecasters were saying they were expecting between 9 and 12 feet of storm surge, a deadly number for any community, especially when you consider that many of the structures in this area are one-story structures. Take a look over there. You can see a huge tree that is down. It has fallen on a fence next to a home. This is the situation that we have seen driving the roads through Apalachicola as well. We also know that there are a number of down power lines. Power has been out for a number of hours here as the storm inches near this community. George?
It is closing in. Terrell, thanks very much. I want to go to Washington now. Kenneth Moten at FEMA headquarters, where they have been going around the clock as it preparing for this storm. And Kenneth, we already heard Brock Long in the briefings earlier today saying his biggest concern is people didn't have enough time to get out. Not enough people got out.
And he called it the worst type of storm, unprecedented. Words you don't want to hear from someone in that post, George. But this is a massive federal response. As you just mentioned, FEMA Administrator Brock Long, he was at the White House updating President Trump. He just returned here to FEMA headquarters to the Nerve Center for this massive federal response to hold an interagency call with local and state officials in the Southeast. As you see, rows and rows of people behind me, they are coordinating this federal effort. FEMA says it has thousands of people on the ground in the Southeast, 3,000 people to be exact, so that they can respond and mobilize quickly to those areas hit by this storm. Now, as you know, FEMA says it is monitoring the situation. Other headlines from them, George, the focus post-storm will be on getting those roads open to get those first responders in after the storm. And due to down trees and down power lines, the agency is preparing for electricity to really be out for weeks. FEMA is also worried about those buildings in Florida that were built before 2001, George, that apparently do not have the same codes, building codes, construction codes. And what we understand is that those built before 2001 really likely won't be able to withstand a Category 3 storm, and we know that we're dealing with a Cat 4 here. Last night, I should also tell you, George, 4,000 people entered 70 Red Cross shelters across the Panhandle of Florida and Alabama. FEMA is also keeping close watch on Georgia, where hurricane-force winds are expected to bring trees down, power out, widespread structural damage, and the threat of tornadoes along the track of Michael. And then there's that heavy rain threat in the Carolinas, George, because we know that those states are still dealing with the impacts of Florence.
Yeah, boy, they sure are, Kenneth. Thanks very much. I actually want to go to Eva Pilgrim. She is in South Carolina right now, and of course hit so hard by Hurricane Florence. Eva, the weather hasn't quite come in yet, but already getting a little wet.
Yeah, we're already getting rain. This is actually a different system, and this is part of the problem that we're looking at here. This area, the Carolinas, has seen so much rain. First from Florence, that slow-moving hurricane that just dumped and dumped across the Carolinas, and then the rain that has just naturally come here as it does this time of year through this season. And so the ground here is already inundated with rain. They're waiting to see how this storm moves through, to see how much rain falls into this area that already has seen the ground so wet. And the governor here in South Carolina, they actually never lifted their state of emergency after Hurricane Florence. They've actually just extended it to deal with Hurricane Michael that is now heading this way. George?
Okay, Eva, thanks very much. I want to go to Victor Akendo in Tallahassee. They are getting ready.
Yes, they are, George. Hurricane Michael is headed right this way. Right now, we're starting to feel those outer bands. The rain here has been consistent, and now those gusts of wind are only getting stronger. We just heard from county officials. They say that Tallahassee has not seen a storm like this in more than a century. They say that if you have not evacuated, if you have not left your home, the time for that has passed. You need to seek shelter immediately. West Tallahassee is expected to get the worst of it here. Florida's capital is beautiful, but it is covered with trees. You've got a lot of big oak trees as well. Just take a look at that big one right over there. You've got that Spanish moss hanging right down from it. That's already littering a lot of the streets here in Tallahassee. The big concern all along for folks here, those trees coming down as Hurricane Michael marches through here, and power outages. We could be looking at projectiles, a lot of debris just covering the roads. So that's going to mean road blockages, power outages for some time to come. Now, they did pre-position a bunch of crews in this area, more than 1,000 utility workers already here in place. You've got road clearing crews and power crews as well. But here's the thing. They won't be able to get out there and do their work once the winds reach more than 35 miles per hour. We're expecting about 5 to 8 inches of rain here in Tallahassee. We could see some tornadoes as well. So just to reiterate from county officials, if you have not left your home, now is not the time to do so. Stay off the roads and seek shelter immediately.
George, hunkered down at this point. Okay, Victor, thanks very much. Also want to go to Maggie Rulli. It is hitting hard now.
Here for us here in Panama City Beach.
Okay, Maggie, and David Muir back in Panama City as well, where it seems to have calmed down, or you're inside at this point.
Yeah, we're inside, just inside where we are staying inside this hotel I mentioned to you earlier. Obviously, we make sure that the hotels that we do stay at have reinforced walls. Give you an idea, the fire alarm is now going off in the building. I'm not sure if you can hear. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but you can see all the families who are gathered here. These are families who heeded the warning to leave their homes, come to this hotel, and to ride out this hurricane, this Category 4 hurricane that's now hitting. They have wind gusts 119 miles per hour right here in Panama City. I'm not going to go back outside for obvious reasons, but Dale, if you could just show folks at home what it looks like as the Category 4 barrels through the eye wall coming ashore, the Florida Panhandle right now. Obviously, just an extraordinary thing to witness, the power of these hurricanes and the fact that this one is really the size and scope of nothing they've ever seen before in this part of the Florida Panhandle as it whips by. Again, that's the entrance to the hotel that we're staying in. And when we were outside, we were protected somewhat by giant cement walls and U-Haul trucks and vans that are parked outside to barricade the area, and yet you're still seeing that through the front door of the hotel. You're hearing the alarms go off inside the hotel. The power went out some time ago. We actually saw the transformer explosion just down the street, George. But this is just really obviously an awesome sight to see, but it illustrates the real danger that authorities here have been talking about for the last 24 hours and telling people to get out, to try to seek shelter, to come to one of these hotels, or to go further inland. This is what all of these families who are standing behind the camera are watching along with us here this afternoon unfold here. The only blessing, if there is one, with a hurricane this large is that, as you have been pointing out with Sam, that it is moving fairly quickly, moving much more quickly than what we saw in Florence, and certainly in Harvey, where those came ashore and then they just sat there and they dumped water. And look at the scope of the water that you see over my shoulder here. And yet this hurricane is moving more quickly than those previous hurricanes that we've reported on. It's somewhat remarkable that you have states of emergency in several states already. They're now preparing for the possibility that it'll be at hurricane strength when it travels through Georgia and beyond. And Ginger, we've now moved inside just as you did earlier. You got the early brunt of this, but we're now seeing the sheer force as this makes its way through Panama City. And the last wind gust that I saw reported, Ginger, was 119 miles per hour right here in Panama City.
And David, no matter where you are in this storm, I just saw something I have never seen in real life. I've seen it on video, and I have seen it in a 3D graphic that we made to describe storm surge. I saw an entire home taken off of its foundation and rolled down the street. That is the type of storm surge we're talking about right here in Mexico City at this moment. You can't see it, but we could just start to make out, and I saw the roof on its side rolling down the street, and that was one of the structures that I had showed you earlier. I can't see if any of the others have made it. The water is still at least 10 feet below us, but remember I told you we're on a 3rd floor. We have rooms 4th and 5th, so we're able to go up if we needed to. But I'm going to tell you right now, anything that was on this coast within 20 minutes just now is gone, is going to be washed away. It is going to be one of those concrete slab situations when this all calms down. My heart is racing. I have never, George, seen something like an entire home, a well-built home, rolling down the street, except for we made this 3D graphic so that we could explain to people after Sandy happened what storm surge really does to a structure, what it can do to your home, and how quickly it can come in. We just watched that happen in real time. And I'll tell you right now, it makes you shake.
I can hear it in your voice. It is just staggering. Staggering, Ginger, and we're glad that all of you are at least a little bit higher up, and if at any moment it comes time for you to go, you've got to get fully inside. We
feel still very good.
Want to bring in Congressman Neil Dunn now. He represents this district from Central Panhandle through Tallahassee and Panama City. Boy, you're going to have a lot of work ahead of you, Congressman.
Yeah, this is an unprecedented storm in Florida history. We've never seen anything like it. It's huge. It's, as you said, a Category 4, and the storm surge is literally unprecedented.
And Congressman, did you have the sense that the people, your constituents, had heeded the warnings and had evacuated in time?
I wish I could tell you that I felt comfortable about that. I think that we have had a shortage of evacuations. Our shelters hit a certain amount of fullness. We have 4 shelters open, and people in them, 2 or 3 are full, but the other one is not. Honestly, there's going to be a lot of damage. It's hard to predict because it's just that we don't have a model for it. I've spent most of the morning working with FEMA and other agencies to plan and prepare for pre- and post-disaster support, supplies, people, services. We're working with the utilities, the first responders, the hospital, transportation, the police.
Yeah, it's
too late now. The storm is upon us, and everybody has to shelter in place and take no chances, no risks. Just be safe, be resilient, take care of your family and your neighbors.
Are you down there now, or are you in Washington?
No, I'm
in Miami. And Sam, what should people who are in the middle of this right now caught? What should they be doing?
Hey, George, we want to get people ready. I do have a headline for you right now, and this is very important information just came in. The center of this storm did make landfall near Mexico Beach, 155-mile-per-hour winds with this storm. Now, remember, a Category 5 is 156. So we are at the top level of a Cat 4. The Hurricane Center will go back and look at all of the gauges, look at all of the readings to see whether this was indeed a Cat 4 or Cat 5 at landfall. But this is an historic event in this location and for the coast of the U.S. This is rarefied territory for a storm to become this big, this strong, and make landfall anywhere in the United States.
That is a headline right there.
George,
the landfall. Wait, before you go there, because I want to go back to Ginger right now, because she's on the scene where Michael just made landfall. Ginger. I think we may have lost Ginger. David Muir, are you there?
I am here, and of course we all are thinking about Ginger right now, since she is in precisely the location where this hurricane just made landfall, and I'm sure we will go back to her as soon as we can for folks at home who are watching and obviously thinking about her, as we all are, and our team right there. Looking out this window right here, this is the hotel we're in Panama City. We are not far from where Ginger is. Winds are now gusting here at 129 miles per hour. The SUVs that you can sort of see through that front door, we're not standing out there because there are significant pieces of debris and parts of buildings now ripping off of the building and flying through the air. So we've stepped inside for obvious reasons. But those SUVs were literally lifting somewhat right out of the air. You can see the front end of that SUV on the left just bobbing in the wind as huge pieces of rooftops literally fly past the front window. You can hear the alarms going off in the background here. And Dale, I want to show folks at home these windows on the right-hand side. When you talk about construction, and obviously the codes have changed as we've seen the ferocity of these hurricanes through the years, but this window is an example of testing storm-proof windows. The management here at the hotel told us that this was up to code, but you can see the water coming right through the window, and you can see the window sort of buckling in the wind. It's a real test of infrastructure all throughout Florida's Panhandle. And down on the ground here, Dale, you can see these are parts of the building, the cement that's come off the side of the building. You see that there on the floor. All of this as we learned that the radar in Tallahassee has now come offline, and we're not getting any more weather information. That's one location where it's simply been overwhelmed by the weather. I don't want people to be alarmed by that fire alarm. It's simply a signal that the power has gone out inside the hotel where so many of the families here in this community have come to seek shelter, as we report here too. I just want you to hear the wind right outside this doorway. Just take a listen to this. We knew this was going to be a powerful hurricane as we watched it intensify over the last 48 hours from a Cat 3, then to a Cat 4. And as we just heard from Sam Champion, when it made landfall, and of course they will go back and they will study this, it made landfall 1 mile per hour less than a Category 5 hurricane. The fact that it was a Category 4 already made history here, but this notion that it was almost as powerful as a Cat 5 is simply stunning here. I want to get back to meteorologist Rob Marciano, who's also down here, Rob. And as we await to hear from Ginger, just describe for us, if you will, what you're seeing right now.
Okay, we're just west of your position, a little closer to the beach. We were just on the beach, and we said we would take you to the other side of the street, the windward side, if you will, as this storm now makes landfall and the winds begin to shift. We are in about on the second floor of a parking structure, an open-air stairwell, so you can get a sense of just how ferocious these winds are. Looking down the parking lots here off the main strip, and the main strip, the two-lane highway there, that is all but desolate as debris continues to swirl past us. You can hear that roar that David mentioned, whistling through parts of this parking structure. But you also hear, and then see from time to time, shingles and sheet metal being ripped off different structures. Obviously, the structures that are quite made as well, they're the ones most susceptible. Well, we've seen everybody take a hit, every building here take a hit of some sort.
Rob, thank you. We are in our same location, and I've got to tell you, a significant scare for the families who are inside this hotel with us. As you're looking out through the window, you can see the roof of the hotel that we had been standing out there. That was the shelter for a Category 4 hurricane. That has now come down on those SUVs that I was just telling you about. We are in our same location, and I've got to tell you, a significant scare for the families who are inside this hotel with us. As you're looking out through the window, you can see the roof of the hotel that we had been standing out there. That was the shelter for a Category 4 hurricane. That has now come down on those SUVs that I was just telling you about earlier. Listen, the wind is picking up so much. We're gonna take a break, send it back to you, George. I want to make sure everybody's safe. We'll talk to you shortly.
Those winds so fierce right now. And Sam Champion back in Miami, we're seeing the power, the destructive power of those winds right now. So intense.
George, we're all watching something together that very few of us get a chance to see, and I've been doing this for more than 30, 35 years, but a daytime hit of a hurricane that's a high 4, near a 5, moving through. This gives people a chance to see exactly how powerful this kind of storm is, and our crews have done everything right. We've put people in safe positions, but still have cameras so you can see the damage. The one thing, George, I want to remind people is that now that we have the center of this storm moving on shore, the storm will not get stronger, but it will stay this strength for a few hours longer as it slowly weakens. So I want to talk to people who are inland, away from the coast right now, and I mean Tallahassee into South Georgia, that southeastern corner of Alabama. All of you, I need you to kind of pay attention to what we're going to tell you right now, because as this storm now moves away and you're away from the flooding, if you have no connection with this storm surge and you're far enough inland, then what I need you to do, if you're with your family and you have information about what's going on, when this wind picks up like this and gets this strong, we will have 90 to 110 mile per hour winds well inland, in Tallahassee, also in Georgia, and that little corner of Alabama. So take your family into an interior hallway, drag every mattress that you have that you can get your hands on, and take it with you. Bring all your supplies with you. If you have an interior bathroom that has no windows, if you have an interior walk-in closet, walls are your friend against wind, tight walls. So every corner makes the building stronger. And the reason we like bathrooms is the plumbing running through those 2x4s within the wall actually helps make that wall stronger, and you can use the tub to get in and pull a mattress over you, much like you would a tornado, to protect yourself from debris. Because I've been in these buildings when they fall apart like this, when the constant wind of a Category 4 or 5 hurricane tears them apart, and there will be flying debris. There'll be glass, there'll be insulation, there'll be wood, there'll be nails in that wood, all of it kind of moving through. So you want to put yourself in your home, an interior hallway, that walk-in closet, that bathroom, put everybody in with all your supplies, and stay for the duration. And this storm will be with you from 6 to 10 hours.
And Sam, I should say, that's exactly what Ginger has done. You know, we went to Ginger a few minutes ago and we had lost her and we couldn't hear from her, but we have now heard from her. Even though she's lost and her crew, they've lost the ability to broadcast, but as she's telling us now, she is safe. Wanted to make sure everybody knew that as well. And Sam, you're giving good information to the people who are in the path of the storm right now. As we see that map right there, it's going to be several intense hours ahead for everybody in the path of Hurricane Michael, because it's, as you were saying, it's going to kind of keep its structure as it moves quickly.
Yeah, this storm was very powerful, and it was kind of operating on its own. It didn't need to feed on the shallow waters of the Gulf. When you have a system that's a 4 or a 5, it just spins on its own, and it takes a long time to unwind it. So we will have this 3-4 in inland areas of the Florida Panhandle now. So Tallahassee and cities like that will be seeing exactly what we have with the winds. They just won't be facing a lot of the storm surge, and Georgia needs to know that too. But this storm is very different from the storm that we just broadcast a few weeks ago in Florence, when we're talking about it being a wet storm and a flooding storm. Once we get past that impact of the water up against the shoreline, we're talking about this storm being a damaging windstorm. So you really have to put yourself in your home and in any building you're in a secure location. One thing I want to tell you about hurricane-proof glass. The glass itself, that pane of glass, you can take a baseball bat and you can hammer it. It will not shatter to about 130 plus mile per hour winds. But what seals the window to the building is not hurricane proof. And those windows can often come out. So I don't want you to have the safety that if you're standing by hurricane glass watching this, you can watch it. George, you can't.
No, you cannot. Good counsel there, Sam. Thank you. I want to go back to Rob Marciano on Panama City Beach as we see so much debris being thrown around by those winds. Rob.
George? Hi, guys. Sorry about that, George. My earpiece getting filled with water, as you can imagine. The amount of rain now coming out of these clouds and blowing sideways, slapping me in the face, and just filling my ear canal with water. We're on the other side of this parking structure on the ground level, obviously. Look at that. Someone came new to the work at a bike, and they may be one of the folks at our hotel or are not going anywhere anytime too soon. Wanted to give you this vantage point. And again, we're somewhat protected by this structure here, so the wind's not nearly as ferocious as they would be if I were to step out in a more precarious position about 30 feet or 50 feet that way. Every once in a while we get these puffs. And I think Sam mentioned it. Along this high wall, there are little vortices as it wobbles inland that have these puffs, if you want to call it euphemism, that are really intense. It can easily knock you down. Those palm trees, check it out, how they are bending in this breeze of full-on hurricane strength. They are not coming down. There's a reason their palm trees are in the tropics, because they can take this wind. And when this storm gets a little further inland, after your neck, boy, they got some tough trees that are tall. Pine trees as well. And they're going to come down. So we've got that 1-2 punch happening with this. But this, I've been in the western eye wall of a couple of storms, one actually notable. Hurricane Ivan back in 2004 also came in this area, a little bit farther to our west. And this side of the eye wall, I can assure you, is not any more fun than the other side. It is brutal here, and we're in this for another good couple of hours, George. And then the wind shifts, and we got a whole other set of issues, which we'll bring it to you live. And daylight, as Sam mentioned, it's an unusual event that you, the viewer at home, get to witness the power of Mother Nature firsthand.
It is coming in so strong, so fierce. I want to go now to Ken Graham, the director of the National Hurricane Center. And Ken, what is the most important thing you want people to know about this hurricane right now?
Yeah, we're really worried about, of course, the wind that you're seeing, some of the images from everybody. This is intense wind. I mean, landfall at 155 miles an hour, so structural damage, trees down, power outages, and that's just part of it. I mean, we're looking at some of the readings here at Panama City, already gusting to 129 miles an hour. Now, some of this could be well away, so once you start making landfall, even these rain bands away from the center of the storm could start having hurricane force wind. So this isn't just coastal, this is going to stretch pretty far inland.
And Ken, talk about the path that we're going to see over the next several hours and what could happen to the hurricane.
And look at this. So we do expect some weakening once you make landfall, so you start to see that. But here's the issue. When you come ashore that strong, a Category 4, 155 miles an hour, we still are forecasting to still be a hurricane on the Alabama-Georgia state line, a tropical storm even tomorrow, looking at the Georgia-South Carolina line. So this isn't just coastal here. Catastrophic damage right along the coast. But you'll start seeing the rainfall and gusty winds well into Georgia and the Carolinas. You can still see some power outages in those areas.
And Ken, we heard Ginger say this before. This is the strongest storm to hit the United States since Camille back in 1969.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I looked at some of the stats, and here's an interesting one, too. We got statistics going back to 1851 on these hurricanes, and this one here is the first Cat 4 in the Florida Panhandle, so historic in that regard. The other one, 919 millibars, makes it the top 3 or 4 lowest pressures of U.S. landfalling hurricanes as well. So, a very strong system, catastrophic damage associated with the storm surge, the rain, and also the wind.
My goodness. Okay, Ken Graham, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. I want to go back to Maggie Rulli in Panama City Beach. Maggie.
Well, George, not sure if you can hear that behind me. The whistling and the wind just continues to intensify. And the biggest change I've noticed about in the past half hour is just this wind you see is now constant. There is no break in these wind gusts, and they keep getting stronger and stronger. We were out there not too long ago, and I've had to keep moving further inside under the hotel awning just to stay safe. And it's a good thing we did. The second we moved inside, a huge sign from down the street ripped off its foundation, came barreling down just behind us. So we're staying more inside for now. And again, the biggest change is just these winds are intense, they're constant, and you can hear them whipping past your ears nonstop, George.
And Maggie, you've been there for several hours this morning. When did people start to move off the streets, and when did you really have the feel that everybody was hunkered down inside?
I have to say, at first there was some draw to be outside, the anticipation. We were out here, like I said, since 3 a.m. this morning when it was still relatively quiet, and that's when you saw a lot more people, especially media, outside walking around, taking videos. But just about an hour and a half ago is when things really started to get intense, and I think people realized this is the time to take this storm seriously. The governor's been urging us. It's a strong Category 4, pushing 150 miles per hour, so this is not something to mess around with. And once we started seeing and hearing this wind whip up and seeing that debris, that's when everyone really pushed inside and started to take shelter.
Okay, Maggie, thanks very much. I want to go back to Sam Champion right now. And Sam, boy, as we see those trees reaching an actual crisis point, and the idea of climate change, talk about what we know and what we don't know about the impact of climate change on intense weather events like this hurricane.
So, George, you know, when we get down to what we do know and what we believe and what we don't know, I would put that in 3 separate categories, because what we know has been proven that we know that in increased levels of carbon in the atmosphere has certainly done a lot to put more energy in the atmosphere, certainly done a lot to put more water in our oceans, and so that, we believe, will make the storms a little bit stronger. But in the next 2 categories of what we believe and what we don't know, it comes down to how many hands we have on deck for science. We have to be able to, and there are lots of scientists who will tell you they will point to these stronger storms as being contributed by climate change, to being stronger because of climate change. But we really need to put hands on deck to be able to prove that the warmer waters of the ocean, by the way, this storm was moving through waters in the Gulf that were 2 to 4 degrees warmer than normal for this time of year. So when you talk about warmer water making a difference on stronger hurricanes, this is the kind of thing we have to put together and show to people, you know, and George, it's just one of those things where we know it, we believe it, we just have to have the science and the proof to back it up and show people. George, one of the things that the Hurricane Center just did was talk about the inland path of this storm, and while we have everybody's attention because we have those incredible images of this thing making landfall, I wanted to talk about I wanted to go one step further than Georgia into Carolinas, if that's okay with you guys, if you have time for that. So we noticed by the time we get to Dothan, Alabama and Albany, Georgia, we've got a Category 2 hurricane inland. Category 2 hurricane. This is going to be disastrous damage for South Georgia. Then the other thing, we're going to watch that cruise through Georgia and get into South Carolina. And at that point, we have about 45-mile-per-hour winds with the center of this storm. It's a tropical storm, an inland tropical storm in South Carolina and North Carolina, dumping 6 to 10 inches of rain in the same areas that flooded with Florence. And I wanted to give those people a heads up on that, George, happening Thursday into Friday for them.
Yeah, this storm is not nearly done. Okay, Sam, thanks very much. I want to go back to David Muir in Panama City Beach, where we've already seen so much destruction, David.
Yeah, just extraordinary, George, to put this in perspective. As you've been likely saying, we were in sort of a stairwell here, a brick fortified stairwell with so many of the families that I showed you earlier. But then to emerge and be able to see the email again, 3rd strongest hurricane to hit the U.S., not since Hurricane Camille in 1969. Everybody here on the crew, everybody is safe. I just wanted to share that with you. But I also wanted to give you an idea. This is what we had showed you earlier. The front end of the hotel coming straight down. That was where, obviously, we had been reporting earlier in the special, and you can see that roof down on a number of cars that were out there. Those were some of the SUVs that were parked there on purpose, so that it would sort of protect the team, as we were reporting early on. But you could feel this, George, as the hurricane grew closer, and you can actually still see through the window over there just the ferocity.
And David, the families that you're hunkered down
with, the water that is whipping by.
Do the families you're hunkered down with, do they have any idea yet what's happened to their homes, or is it way too early to know?
Yeah, I think it's just absolutely impossible. And in fact, when we were in the hallway with many of them, we couldn't even get out on our cell phones. It just gives you an idea of, you know, when we're in the middle of these natural disasters, the cell service immediately goes out because everybody is competing for what little cell power there remains. Actually, we're just going to back up a little bit from this door. You can actually sense when the pressure changes inside the hotel. You can see it in the rattling glass, but you can actually feel it and you can hear it too, George. The wind, it's just incredible. And I see those outer windows that, you know, we were told were up to code. They're actually buckling somewhat, and we'll have to see if they're able to withstand this hurricane before Michael's actually done passing through. I should tell you, George, you did ask about the families. So many of them, when they saw us back away and move into the stairwell, they too went into hallways on the interior part of the hotel. A lot of them are in the hallways here, and which is the smart thing to do. They have been following the advice of people here in the hotel and managers, and when they were told to seek safety in the hallways, they did. And we should mention that, you know, this morning, with just a few hours left, we heard from the administrator at FEMA, the head of FEMA, saying that the time to leave was over. We heard from Rick Scott, who said this hurricane can kill. And in fact, we know it already did long before it made landfall here in the U.S. It was responsible for a dozen or more deaths on its way here. So let's just hope with what we have witnessed here today, which is, quite frankly, and I've covered many of these hurricanes, something I haven't seen before.
And David, you could say we know now this is just the beginning. The cleanup effort here is going to be massive. It's going to take days and weeks.
Oh, there's no question. Even when we were still outside, George, to see the number of trees that came down within the first 15 minutes of just the outer bands of this hurricane arriving, and the power lines, they came down immediately. The power went out in the hotel. And it's important for folks who are watching this unfold at home that we have not forgotten about Alabama and Georgia. They are in the path of this storm next. The hurricane is going to be moving very quickly, unlike what we saw in Florence. And there's a significant worry that the power could be out for days, if not weeks, where this hurricane is headed next, even when it's done. With its damage right here in the Florida Panhandle, which is just extraordinary. I should mention, I know you shared it with viewers on the air earlier. Everybody here on the team is safe. Ginger Z, that's one thing I was really happy to see when I got out of that stairwell, George, is that she tweeted as well that she's safe. But you know, we're all watching those images on social media the way you are too, and to see that home lifted off its foundation and carried with the storm surge not far from where we were, that's just a stunning sight to see unfold here this morning.
Historically powerful storm. Okay, David, I know we're going to see you tonight, a special edition of World News Tonight from Panama City Beach. Our coverage is going to continue all day long online at abcnews.com. Hurricane Michael has made landfall, Category 4, 150-mile-an-hour winds. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.